Very excited to be doing this fireside chat with Tomi. Independently, I've heard a lot of buzz from Layer 6, and people were pinging me about you should talk to Tomi, and then I looked at the schedule and was like, oh my god, I actually, serendipitously will be doing a fireside chat with him, so got a little treat. Okay, so one of the things, with all these AI companies popping up with more and more kind of crazy claims is that we want validation. And so with that in mind, can you please explain to us what the International ACM Recommendation Challenge is?
Sure. So the ACM RecSys Challenge is an annual conference put on by ACM RecSys. So ACM, the American computing body, has a annual conference called RecSys for Recommendation Systems. This is a conference that's being visited by all the people who work on enterprise personalization and recommendations. And the RecSys Challenge is a competition that goes with it. It's kind of like the ImageNet Challenge for people working on enterprise data. And it's a highly contested challenge. It was won by Alibaba last year and Yandex, Google's Russia, the year before. And this year, it's always administered by a third party. It was run by a company called Zing, which is Europeans' LinkedIn. And what was unique about it this year is that they ran an offline test, and then they actually put it into production. So we knew that this was going to be running live. And it tested, in this particular case, it tested the cold start problem, which is a case where a new item is introduced, and you may not have a lot of interaction data on that item, so you need to use other means to make the recommendation.
Oh, excellent. So, yeah, as you were mentioning, cold start is an incredibly a problem that you would want to face in industry, so it's a validation. So Layer 6 did extremely well. Sort of the title of this is that you guys won. Can you sort of explain what your solution was and how well you fared against the second place, third place?
Yeah, sure. First, just by way of motivation. So I had my partner Jordan and I, we had put forward this concept of the Vector Institute to have both industry and the government double down on AI in Canada and to carry forward the academic breakthroughs and drive that into industry. Some of the vector skeptics in the room may have said, well, isn't AI the domain of Silicon Valley companies? Isn't this the domain of Americans? Haven't we already lost the battle? I think it was important, following the launch of the Vector Institute, which was announced in March, that we could demonstrate that a Canadian company can win in AI. So that was the motivation. We put a lot of effort in our company to compete in it. And I was on the stage last year describing that we have this novel way of approaching using deep learning in recommendation settings. And skeptics abound, so I needed to prove that it works. Our approach is one where we use a deep learning approach to model both of the users and the content, and that creates what's called an embedding of all the items that helps us then very quickly provide recommendations. So one of the techniques that worked for us very well was that we were able to turn around recommendations within 30 minutes when it ran live. If we hadn't used a neural network approach, it would have taken us a full day to do the training. So we were just able to iterate much faster. We had a greater understanding of the users in this data set. And because it was a live test, a lot of these competitions are set up as a synthetic offline tests. But because this was a live test, we spent a lot of time in validating the data. So it actually worked not just in simulations, but in the live tests as well. So typically these contests are won by basis points. We won it by a full 12.5%. So we were up 12.5%, and the next 5 were like back-to-back. So we crushed it. With regard to, I'm not going to go into details of how the technology works. There's a paper on RecSys that describes it. We have a NIPS paper coming up describing the deep learning approach, and we have an AIII paper describing the combination of the two approaches.
Excellent. Okay, so without going into too much detail, but maybe on a more philosophical level, I think when we think about companies that do advanced analytics as a service, there's a tension between customized models that do very, very well, and maybe one model fits all pretty well. How do you think about this, both in the context of the challenge and just the work that you're doing in Layer 6?
Yeah, so we don't see ourselves as an AI services company. We see ourselves as a platform company, a product company, and we specifically focus on one customer base. These are banks with customer 360 models, and we build prediction systems on top of those. So repeatable, deployable systems. And, to the extent that all of the training data is the same, then you can draw multiple predictions out of it. Certainly you have to train the model to predict the observed outcome, but the model itself is highly repeatable, and we can deploy it across multiple interfaces.
So you're able to find something very meaty within. Okay, so very excited to hear about what's coming next for Layer 6.
Sure. So I've had this experience of building a number of software companies, and one of the things I like about software is that you can measure quality. You can compete globally. There's no subjectivity to it at all. You can quantify the quality of it. And I've had a few experiences where I've built software companies that have had successful exits. The first one was when I was in college. I built a data compression company. It brought Windows 95 from 13 floppy disks to 11. But I could demonstrate that it was the best in the world. But the best application of that was within Microsoft. So I sold that to Microsoft. The second business was around web search technology I built, doing some ranking engines, a core technology. It was a ranking engine that was 4 times faster than anything else out there. And what am I going to do? Am I going to go compete with Google? No. I found a buyer for that, and it was bought by Yahoo, and now powers Yahoo Search and Bing. But this one is special. So I feel very confident that this is the best prediction engine for enterprise data, and that core foundational technology is the basis of a very large company that we intend to build here in Canada. And our first set of clients are banks. We're working with 4 out of the 5 Canadian banks and a number of international banks as well. So we're very excited where the business is headed.
All right. Maybe to finish off then, a fun question. Why Layer 6, the number 6?
All right. So all the neuroscientists in the room would love this one. The human cortex has 6 layers of neurons, 6 layers, the integrative layer. And so we love deep learning so much we named the company after it. That's the answer.
Thank you, Tomi.
Thank you.